Outstanding. Well, welcome everybody to another Spindle TV exclusive class. For those of you that might be new subscribers to Spindle TV, I'm Laney Shaughnessy. I'll be your host, and joining me live on screen are some of the gold members. We have Doug, John, and JR, and then Ronnie. Hello, Ronnie. How are you doing tonight? Hello, John. JR, how's it going? And Doug. I want to take just a quick second. Give me 2 seconds. I want to look at something. Let me see here. I just want to almost. And you had said that you posted it in the comment section. Great job. I see the jig. I wanted to see the jig that you made. That is it. So Doug on screen with us, ladies and gentlemen, he posed a question in the Spindle TV exclusive group on, how we would approach, helping him make, work with small parts safely. Right. So we I had some ideas, threw it out there, and he posted in the Spindle TV group the jig that he made based off of that, which is awesome. And if you're not a member, if you have Facebook, and you're not a member of the Spindle TV exclusive group, I highly encourage you to get in there, because it's a great place for you all to interact with one another, but also interact with me as well. And if you have a Facebook account, send me a friend request. If you're not in the group, send me a friend request, and I'll send you an exclusive invite to that group. Because, hey, just like Doug, if you have questions, you guys can help each other. I want it to be a community where everyone's helping everyone, and also a community that I can interact with you more on a regular basis to help you out as well. And it was cool. It's cool to see that come to life, Doug. That's very cool. JR, how is your evening going tonight, sir?
You're muted, JR.
You're muted, JR. So
sorry about that.
No, you're great now. That's doing good.
Okay, no, doing good. Got my hand somewhat back, so should be able to get back in the studio and get
excellent. That's good. That's really good to hear about that. Getting, because that's had you down and out for a little bit, hadn't it?
Good month and a half.
Yeah, absolutely. John, how are you doing, sir?
Good, doing good. Was over doing a little side work for a buddy of mine, restaurant. He had enclosed his front patio, and I guess to make it like all season. And he had a guy in there framed the original exterior of the wall with 2x4s. And they put in electric, and they got this split unit, the heater air conditioner units, mini splits.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Had about 8 or 10 of them installed in there. And then the guy never came back to put the plywood on the wall, on the studs, and so that they could put the rough cut like barn board stuff on. So I went over and put all the plywood up today. I'm going back tomorrow and put up the barn wood, and then he can do his thing.
Oh, that's good. Well, that's awesome that you're able to help out. And Ronnie, last but not least, how are you doing, sir? How's your day going?
I tell you, if it got any better, I'd be on my yacht down in the Caribbean.
You and me both.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, just grinding away. Another day.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost, I didn't know if we were going to have a class tonight, because Florida weather tonight we had some severe storms, and it finally let up. But man, the lightning strikes and everything. In my old shop, not in the new shop building, my old shop is right next door. I ended up, I ripped out the old electrical panel and had to put in a new one. because I ran out of spaces and everything. And I'm sitting there. I've got the doors wide open because it's pitch black in there. I've got the doors wide open, trying to get as much light in as I can. But it's raining. It's pouring down rain, and lightning strikes all in the yard. And I mean, just like as soon as the lightning flashes, it would thunder because it was close. I mean, it was like bam, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm sitting here like of course, there's no power going to the building. I'm not working with live wires or anything, but that electricity from the sky was live. And I thought, man, I hope this lets up so I can, because class is tonight. And it did. So we are luckily enough to have a class this evening. And something a little news or announcement or whatever, this coming Wednesday, most likely, I'm going to assume it's this coming Wednesday. One of these Wednesdays coming up shortly, I have been invited by Garrett from IDC Woodcraft. You guys probably have seen some of Garrett's videos on YouTube and stuff like that. He has asked me to be a guest speaker on one of his Wednesday night live events. And I have accepted. I just told him, let me know because I do live classes for y'all on Wednesday. Let me know what night or what Wednesday night he's thinking about, and I'll reschedule us. I'll push us to like a Thursday while I attend, as a guest on one of his live events. And I thought that was nice of him to reach out. I don't think he quite remembers that he and I have actually spoken on the phone before, but his email, he introduced himself, and telling me who he was. So he's been kind of watching me in the background and, has been impressed. And his viewers know me as well, probably because many of them are you guys and girls as well, too. And so he thought it would be cool if I could be a guest on this show. And I wrote him back and said, yeah, Garrett, I'm very much aware of your channel. We've actually talked on the phone. We know each other, but to an extent, I guess. But yes, I would be happy. And so we'll see what he hasn't replied back to let me know what date he's thinking. But one of these Wednesdays, you'll get an announcement from me that our class will be on a Thursday night instead of that Wednesday because I'll be attending and everything. So just keep an eye out for that. I'll let you all know and everything. So tonight we are talking inlays. I thought we would kind of take a break from 3D for a bit, get everybody involved with something that everyone can do from desktop to pro to Aspire, and that's working with inlays. Before I get to talking more about that, let me just say hi to everyone else that's not live on the screen with me. Brooks, Martin, Roger S., Keith Kessler, how are you doing? Kurt H., good to see you. Doug the doll. Is Doug? That's not you, Doug, is it? Doug the doll? You're not Doug the doll, Doug, are you?
No.
No, I didn't think so. I thought it was two different people. Dave Garbett, Alan Lee, and David Krause, Doug Fushi, good to see you. No, that's you, Doug. Sorry, good to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for jumping in and everything. It's good to see you and everything. And Brooks Martin says, full disclosure, I two-time during the premieres. So he's back and forth, probably with other previews and stuff. And David Lowe, it's good to see you all. Now, tonight we are going to be talking about inlays. We're going to be talking about straight, regular inlays, and we're going to talk about V-carve inlays. We'll talk about the advantages and, pros and cons of either one. But we're going to kind of get into it the best that we can. I'm going to try my best to explain, especially when it comes to V-carve inlays, explain, the process to where no matter what you're doing, you'll get a successful, inlay each time, hopefully with what I teach you tonight. And maybe you'll have a better understanding as well as far as, the inlay, process and stuff. Let me get geared up here for just a quick second. Let me get things rocking and rolling on my side.
I'm gonna jump out and jump back in, Laney, because I have all the audio is fuzzy on my end. So
Is anyone else experiencing audio issues or anything? That's yeah, John, do that, but let me know because I'm running Speedify. Should not be buffering or anything this time
you're
around.
not, it's not buffering. It's just that it's fuzzy. Like everybody's audio
Oh,
is fuzzy.
okay. All right, I'll keep an eye out for you and let you back on as soon as you jump in.
Okay.
Awesome, awesome. All right, let's see here. Give me just a moment.
Just a moment.
Let's see. That needs to go there. All right, so we should have 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like John is back. All right, John.
Yeah, it's still the same. That's all right. It's something probably on my end. We have.
All right. Well,
We have
I'm
bad weather.
looking outside my window to see if my skies are cleared up or anything. Like, make sure it's not on my end. But I'm looking at my Speedify. My internet is doing
It does it
okay.
I get this every now and then again. You know, it's just what it is. It's no big deal.
Absolutely. All right. Well, gentlemen, do you have anything that you want to say or add before I jump into kind of a full screen scenario and start talking about these inlays? Anything you want to say? Because I'm going to have you kind of off screen for just a moment. I still haven't, even though I've got the where I'm not buffering as much and all that stuff anymore, still haven't got it yet set up to where we're all still on screen while I'm presenting. That's the next step. One little step at a time.
Yeah.
We're getting there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. All right, let's see here. I am going to be on channel 2, and let's get me down in the bottom left corner. All right, let's see if I can get, bear with me just a moment. So I can get rid of that black corner just a bit to help out some. And let me turn on my mouse pointer so everyone can see what's what. And by the way, mouse highlight by Catnip in the, I guess, Microsoft Store or Google Store or App Store or what have you. It is, I got all kinds of things happening there. It is great for mouse highlighter. Okay, so let's talk inlay for a moment. Let's talk V-carve inlay. Let's talk straight inlay. Let's just talk inlay. Now, when it comes to straight inlays, we actually, Vectric has got it built into their program. They have a toolpath that will help us out. Now, when it comes to the inlay toolpath, this is straight. So your design, whatever it may be, if your design has intricate detail or, you know, tight spots and stuff, you're really going to be limited by the radius or diameter radius of the router bit. You know, it's going to kind of control where the router can get, where the router bit can get and can't reach, right? So knowing that, they have created a set of tool paths that actually account for that. They work together in unison to help. So an example, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just create a simple rectangle to start this off with. And for this rectangle, I'm going to create a pocket, the female inlay, that is referred to as the pocket. And I'm going to just go 1/8 of an inch deep for right now. And again, this numbers or anything, these numbers aren't, you know, set in stone. This is just me giving the demonstration. Now, if I'm doing an inlay, a straight inlay, I want to work with the smallest router bit possible to minimize, you know, the radius or the rounding of the details that I can. So I always use a 1/16 inch end mill. And if you're looking for a good 16th inch end mill, I actually have to recommend Speetool, Speetool, Speetool on Amazon, or speetool.com. Their end mills, I really like their router bits. I honestly do. I really do. I mean, I deal with Amana and Whiteside, Magnate. I've had dealings with, but Whiteside and Amana, we actually work with them at Digital Wood Carver, and we sell their router bits. But I'm a big fan of Speetool as well. I like them, and they're great quality, almost half the price, right? So a 16th inch end mill from Speetool would be a great, it's a very inexpensive tool. I think you're probably in around $18 and good to go. Now, when I create this pocket toolpath and I calculate it and everything, when we look at the 2D view, I'm going to go to the solid view here. If we were to examine the corners and everything, the software accounts for, in the toolpath, it accounts for where that bit can't fit. It cannot get up into that corner. It creates the radius, and it's going to be a smaller radius because it's a smaller diameter bit. But it is what it is when it comes to a straight inlay. That's why V-carve inlay is a thing, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So here, because the female pocket is going to have these rounded corners, these radius corners, the Vectric software actually accounts for that when it's creating the male part. So when working with the male part, and let me come in here and turn off this toolpath, in this inlay, when I go ahead and do the straight, and we'll talk about pockets and holes, straight and step in just a minute, but when I create that straight male part, and let's see here, let's go 0.25 and let's select the same bit, use the same router bit for both the male and the female. We want to carve on the exterior. And I'm not a fan of tabs when it comes to inlays because I don't want to have to do any sanding on my male part or my inlay part. I don't want to mess up the possibility of a perfect fit, and everything by doing any sanding. So it's a small part. I'm cutting a male out, a piece out of a small part. So I typically two-side tape that. Two-sided tape. In the past, I've done hot glue, little dab will do ya, 4 dots in each corner kind of thing. I've still, to this day, I've never used the CA glue and painter's tape, but it is a great method. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good alternative. So just those type of things where I don't have to have tabs, right? Now, when I calculate this, and we're going to talk about offset allowances and stuff in just a moment. We'll get there in just a second. I'll tell you what I'm meaning here in a moment with that. But I'm going to calculate this toolpath. And when the software creates the toolpath, again, if I go into the solid view here, you can see that on the male cut, it accounts for that radius. So it actually cuts that corner off so that we have 2 parts that are perfectly sized the same, right? And they're radius cuts where the inside corners where the router bit is going to create a radius by default. It's going to create on your outside corners for your male. It's going to create that radius as well. So the parts match. You can't fit a square peg into a round hole. Vectric knows this. And so therefore they've created this toolpath to make it easier for us to do inlays. So we don't have to worry about accounting for that in the design. If we were just creating a pocket cut and a profile cut toolpath, then we would have to account for the radius of our bit in those 2 toolpaths if we were trying to attempt to do a straight inlay with those 2 toolpaths. But the inlay toolpath, all automated. So got to love that and everything. Now let's talk about my 2 parts here, my male and female. I have based both the toolpaths, the pocket toolpath and the male toolpath, the female and the male, off the same vector. Therefore, they are going to be cut to the same size. and they're going to be based on the accuracy and of your machine and everything. They're going to be dead nuts the same size. So we have two parts that you would literally have to beat together to get to fit, and we don't want to do that. We want a nice fit where that male fits in there. We've got room for glue, space and things. And when it's all said and done, we have a beautiful, just nice lines, a nice fit. And in order to achieve that, without having to beat the parts together and stuff, we need to allow for it. We need to create what's called an offset allowance. Now, when it comes to the offset allowance and everything, I'm going to strongly advocate and encourage you to do that on your female part, your female pocket. You'll see in the female pocket toolpath, as you go down the toolpath, there is what's called the overcut distance. And the overcut distance is when the line, the vector line that we have selected for the inlay, it's allowing the bit to go over that line ever so slightly to make that pocket just slightly bigger so our male part fits in. Now, pro tip here, my strongest advice to you would be to always cut your male parts first. I'm a big advocate of having the male parts cut out and kind of there when I'm doing the female cuts and everything, have them cut out and ready and stuff and all, because when I am doing the female cuts, I am going to have in the toolpath that allowance offset, that overcut distance, so that I have a nice fit, but I'm going to have my male there so I can test fit. I don't want to unclamp my board off the CNC after the pocket cut gets cut, and only to find out that I'm holding these two parts in hand and I did not make my overcut allowance, my overcut distance, my offset allowance. All three of those words mean the same thing, okay? I did not make my pocket oversized enough to give me that great fit, right? Then I've got those two parts in hand. I realized I didn't set my overcut distance large enough. Now I got to try to get my female pocket back on the board, get re-zeroed out, and try to cut that again without any screw ups or anything. It's always best for me that after the female cuts, I move the CNC, jog it out of the way, and then I'll do like a slight test fit, see how my part fits in. That way, right then and there, if I have to adjust my overcut distance I'm going to be able to just jump back into Vectric, make that slight adjustment, and simply rerun that toolpath right then and there. And I'll end up sneaking up on that cut, for a perfect fit. Now, in my experience, you have to remember now the overcut distance is happening on all sides of this cut. So imagine what happens on the left is going to happen on the right, right? So if I set my overcut distance to be too big, where my bit is cutting my pocket too big, it's kind of almost doubling in what number I put here and everything. And so we don't want a sloppy fit and everything. So I'm going to recommend to you all that we have an overcut distance, or that your starting overcut distance would be somewhere around 0.02 of an inch. That works really well for me in a lot of cases, and that is going to be a 0.002. And when it makes this cut, when we calculate this toolpath, when we go and look at the toolpath in the 2D view, we can see, if I zoom in to the line here, we can see that the bit is just overcutting that line by that 0.02 of an inch. Now it's doing it on both sides. Okay. Now you could do 0.0025, to where when it's all said and done, it's 0.005 of an inch, overcut in all, from the left side and the right, because I have 0.02 over here and 0.02 over here. It's 0.04 of an inch. And for me, that is just a sweet spot, just enough of a slight overcut. I mean, it's just a slight overcut, but it's enough of an overcut that my two parts will fit together beautifully. I'll still have room for glue and everything, and go from there. So male parts cut first. That would be a pro tip for me, a recommendation. So you can use that male part to test fit while you're cutting the female in case you need to make adjustments. And your overcut allowance is always on the female, not on the male. And that overcut distance in the software. And just remember, whatever number you put in here, it's being doubled, right? From one side to the other and everything. So that would be kind of, where if I was doing a straight inlay where there's not a lot of detail, sharp corners and detail that I really want to keep in that inlay where I'm okay with it doing a slight radius and everything, then, the straight inlay is kind of the way to go for me and everything. I do use a 16th inch end mill. I want to keep that radius as small as possible. But, before CNC and before, inlays and V-carve inlays and all that, when we all wanted an inlay, we would be using a hand router. Most times we would have templates that, we could buy off of, Rockler and Woodcraft and other places and things, to help us, kind of, cut males and females and things. And we were doing that by hand. And we always knew that, our design, that, we were kind of, our design is going to, the outcome of that design and the edges and the corners are going to be based on the bit. Nothing's changed there. We now have the ability to just, we don't have to worry about sharp corners and round corners and this not fitting and everything. Vectric takes care of that and automates that process for us in here with these toolpaths. And then when it comes to finer detail, when we have designs with really intricate details and corners and edges, and we don't want to lose them, now we have the ability to do what's called a V-carve inlay, because that point of that V-bit can get right into those crooks and crevices and bring us right up to that nice sharp detail. So it's really opened up and changed a lot of things, especially in the CNC world. It was inevitable that somebody was going to develop that method, and they've done a good job, and it's changed over the years. Back when V-carve inlay was kind of introduced, and everything, there was a PDF put out. Vectric ended up adopting that PDF and kind of working off it and everything as well too. But the numbers were really large, as far as the depth of the female versus the depth of the male, and we're going to talk about parts of an inlay in just a moment. But it left a really big gap for glue in the bottom of the part, but that glue gap was also air. It was a big void and everything. And if you were doing multiple cuts on the same inlay to do different colors and contrast, you were running into these air pockets. So over the years, since it was introduced, the numbers and how the toolpaths are created, it's changed. And everything, and whether the inlay is shallow or deep and things like that. So we're going to get all into all that, and hopefully I'm not going to make your head swell too much, but hopefully it gives you some insight to where when you're ready to do an inlay, it all makes sense to you. So I'm sure this is pretty straightforward right here. Hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Can't fit a square peg in a round hole. Vectric accounts for that. So if you use the inlay toolpath, it'll automatically automate that process for you. And it's just going to be, your only limitation is going to be the radius of the bit, right? So use a small bit. And don't forget the overcut distance. Otherwise you're going to be pounding those things together. Now let's talk about the inlay toolpath just a little bit more and talk about straight versus stepped, pocket versus hole. Straight inlay means that your male is cut to the same size as the female. It's straight walls, and the part, when fit in, it'll generally be sanded flush so that it just looks like one continuous piece of wood and this beautiful contrasting of color and everything. Well, then there is the step inlay. Now, the step inlay, there's not a whole lot of, you don't see a whole lot of it out there on display and stuff like that. But basically, instead of the male part having a straight wall, it has a straight wall to a certain depth, but then there is kind of this T shape, right? Where it kind of, the part of it goes into the female pocket, and then the other part of the inlay part, the male part, sits on top of the surface. And so it really creates a cool, unique effect where it almost looked like the letters or objects or whatever it is that you're doing is glued to the top of the board. It's like there's a backer board, and then you have these parts that are glued to that backer board, and it has that effect. It has that look. Let me see if I can pull up a visual. Give me just a second. Stepped male inlay wood. And let's see if I can show an example. There is, it's so minimal. There's not a whole lot. That's a shame. Let me try a different way of wording that, because nothing really came up as far as an actual real life example of somebody using, in a design. Okay, one more time. Oh. That's horrible. Okay, so yeah, unfortunately, there's no good example for me to show. I'm going to create the tool path so you can at least see the cut and everything, and then we'll talk about it. But unfortunately, there is not a real world example that doing those three search terms. There is not a real world example that I can show you on screen. So let me just create a tool path, and let me show you what I'm referring to as far as that step. So I'm going to go 1/8 of an inch on the step male inlay insert. We're going to just use the same rectangle for right now as the example. And the step depth, which is referred to, if you look at the little diagram when you're in your Vectric software, you have your width and you have your depth. So the depth is the part that's actually going to go into the inlay. That is the part that's going to fit into the inlay. So I actually want that I'm going to account for, glue space if there's any and all, but I want to kind of keep that to, a little bit minimum and everything. So in this case, I will go, give me just a second. I don't know why I'm 1 millimeter, which is 0.039. Thank you. My mind went blank there for just a minute. I'm going to take my 0.125 and I'm just going to subtract 0.039 from that. And that 1 millimeter or 0.039, basically that is just a little bit more than a 32nd and everything. I'm going to allow that for my kind of my glue space and stuff. Now the width is going to be represented by when this part is pressed in to the inlay, and the remaining part of the male is sitting on the surface. How much of a lip is over the edges of the female pocket, that overlap, if you will. And so it really depends on what what you want it to be. In this case, I'll just to kind of be a little extreme, I'm gonna go just 1/8 of an inch, but it really depends on what your job is. I'm just gonna go 1/8 on this as an example. 0.125, and no allowance offset on this. Again, the allowance for me is going to be the female, and that depth, that step depth, that inner cut and all, that's going to be the cut. That's going to be the cut that fits into the female pocket and everything. So when we calculate this tool path, again, I'm going to use a 1/16 of an inch end mill. And when we calculate this tool path, what we will see, let's turn off everything here, is we're going to, and let me change my board size so we can actually realistically see this. I'm going to make my board, in this instance, I'm going to make my board a 1/4 inch, 0.8.
Hey, Laney.
Yes.
I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but it says inlay toolpath 2D cut. It's from Vetric. It's an image that I found on Chrome. I put in stepped inlay or something, I think it was, and then I went to images, and
Right.
I don't know if you can see that. Can you?
Yeah,
see
that's
that?
the T. Yeah, that's what we're doing here. I was looking for an actual real wood, like when they actually glued it in, like the real thing, what it looks like at the end. Yeah, that's what we're kind of simulating here. I'm doing it in a rectangle. They did it in a T. That's what we're about to simulate. But yes, that's the only thing that comes up. There's really no good like finished part.
Yeah, finished
example.
carve.
Hey, Ronnie Bishop, thanks for popping in. But let me calculate this. Let me set this proper here. I'm going to go 1.875 on my thickness. Calculate, and click OK. And reset the preview the visible toolpath. Okay, and let me come in here and do this. Now, that remaining part, if you remember my width, I went 1/8 of an inch. So that's 1/8 of an inch here and 1/8 of an inch here. So I need to kind of go 1/4 on a profile cutout. I'm actually going to offset this because there's a little bit of an extra step involved here. I'm going to offset this outward 1/4. I went the wrong. I said outward and I had inward check. Looked right at it. Let's go ahead and offset outward. And let's see here. Do I need to go just 1/8? Bear with me a second. Oh. One more time. Let's try that again. Yeah, 1.875. Okay. Let me close that. I'm going to create a profile cut, cutting that all the way out. And I'll just use a 1/4 inch end mill just in this example. And I'm going to calculate that. Preview that visible toolpath. Let's turn off the black here. All right, so I need to go in a little bit more. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just go with my 1/8 of an inch, 0.125 offset. Calculate. Mo better. So this would be the male part. Let me get it to generate here. This would be the male part that would go into that inlay. So this area right here, which I had set for that 0.086. I gave myself 0.039, kind of a glue space and everything. This width right here in that male inlay toolpath, I set that. Let's try that again. I set that for 1/8 of an inch. So 1/8 of an inch here. It creates kind of like this, almost like a fitted lid. You know what I mean? Where this inner part goes into the inlay and then this outer part sits on the surface. And what John was showing on the screen when he was when behind the scenes and everything, he was showing a tee that Vetric had made in their tutorial. And if I pull that up, and I can pull it on screen to show you what he was showing. Step Inlay Vetric. If I go to images and click on this, open that in a new tab. Can pull that tab over here. And you can see the same thing that's happened with our rectangle is what they're showing in the tier. And I know it's so small, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, let me see if I can crank up the view for a minute. There we go. But we have the step there, and basically that inner part, that's what is going to go into the female pocket. The outer part here, this lip, that's what's going to sit on the surface. And really, it's really slick. It gives the illusion of the part sitting on top of the surface. And I'm going to, I'm actually going to assume that this would be a real world example. Let me grab this on the screen. I'm going to assume that this compass right here, that they've done kind of a stepped inlay. Now there's inlays here inside the parts, but how this compass, the points of this compass and everything are sitting on the surface of this backboard, I'm going to almost say that that they are in some way or another inlaying that in with a stepped inlay process versus, trying to just glue it on the surface. I don't know. That's an assumption because you can't see underneath and everything, but that's what we'll assume. And so a stepped inlay, it's a pretty cool effect because it literally looks like, your object and everything is just kind of glued to a backer board. You really don't know that it was fitted in. And why not just glue, the parts to the surface of the board? Why do the inlay? Because when you lay out text or objects and everything, this is kind of a guarantee that they're going to go in right where they belong. And the spacing is going to be right. You're not going to accidentally glue the letters crooked or the object crooked. So there's a lot of benefits to it and everything. But it's not one, that you see a whole lot of good examples of. Now, going back to the inlay, let's talk about the hole, for the female, the hole. Now, typically when we do inlays, when we're cutting the female pocket, it's cut to a certain depth. And we fill that depth with a male pocket, right? Sand it flush and it's all done, but it's not a cut through. The whole female inlay version is if we have an inlay that, for instance, we might want to see it from both sides. It could be a hanging ornament or something that it turns or it not with the wind blowing or whatever, but we'll see both sides, And so we have this beautiful inlay that you can admire from both sides of the part instead of just instead of just one side. So that would be the reason that you would use the hole instead of the pocket for the female inlay. You would use the whole option. And another thing that I like using the whole version for is kids toys where one part has to fit into another. If you remember, we had that game. It was like an octagon, 6 or 8 sides that you pull it apart, and all your little squares and circles and shapes and triangles would fall out on the table. It would close back up. It was kind of rubber band spring thing, and had all these shapes. And you drop the star in the star, the moon in the moon, and whatever. Half moon and triangle and shapes and all. And it's we can create a beautiful board, toy type environment where these parts can pass through, and they're kind of a perfect fit. And of course, on that we would give a much greater overcut allowance, right? So the kids aren't having to beat the parts through, kind of thing. So that would be another reason why we would use the hole, kind of a perfect pass-through fit with a generous overcut distance versus the pocket, right? So that could be another scenario. So hopefully I've covered enough on the straight inlays that you kind of understand, what they are and what they do. It's pretty straightforward with those. You just got to know that your design, if you've got fine details and things, those sharp corners are going to get radiused off or rounded off based on the diameter of the bit you use. And if you're good with that, in many cases we are, that's fine, because in many cases it doesn't matter. So that is, all 4 of the tool paths in the inlay: straight, stepped for the male, pocket, and hole for the female. We have on the screen, Daryl said, Laney, say I was doing an inlay with a 2D carve cutout. Is that doable with the inlay process? Say inlay a 2D carve into headboard. 2.5D. Sorry, 2.5D. Yes. And hang tight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to bring everybody up on the screen for a moment. And so y'all wake up, show yourselves. Y'all talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to go grab a sample real quick of what Daryl's talking about. And so I can show a sample of something like that. Give me just 1 second.
Kind of glad he's going over this one tonight. Thinking that will be a down and dirty box. I mean, it's got the rabbits on the side, got the grooves, the dados.
Yeah.
Yeah, make for just a nice lid.
Yeah, lid, bottom, depending on how thick you wanted it. You could cut the inside of the thing out, make it a continuous grain box that's not glued together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could even, I'm thinking of making it as a lid, and then you could V-carve inlay on the top side of it.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
All right. Well, hopefully y'all weren't talking too bad about me while I was gone. All right. Let's see if I can. Let's make myself big for just a second, guys and girls. Hold on a second. Let's get me back up full screen for just a moment. Here we go. Now, I did not make this. This was made for me back when I didn't have. It was before Spindle TV. It was there's a lot of dust and everything. It hangs on my wall. But I had an organization called the United Federation of Woodworkers. It was founded in 2012, and on this particular project here, this 2.5D model, 3D model, 2.5D model, is inlaid into this backboard, the sign and everything. And so this gives a nice contrast of color and everything. And so, Daryl, to answer your question, yes. Basically, what you would want is the profile is going to be the inlay, right? So you're going to have your profile vector is going to be your female pocket for the backer board. And then it's also going to be the male cutout for your 2.5D model or what have you. And you're going to have your overcut distance, same thing. It doesn't apply, and this will, sit right in. And if we look, it's almost kind of see-through because there's a screen in the background as well, too. Bear with me just a second. Let me see if I can give me just a moment. Let me get back to here. And that might help for just a minute. All right, let's see if I can come in and I'll get a little closer and all. But there's a little bit of spacing, and that's more shadow than space. It's not that big, actually. But there's a little bit of spacing around here so that it has that, fit and everything. So to answer your question, yes, it's doable. And you would use the straight inlay for that. You wouldn't use the V-carve inlay method. It would be just the straight inlay, your male and your female, and everything. So that would do that. Now, if he would have done the step version of that, right, then the on the back side of this, it would have been a two-sided. This is just a one-sided project, right? So this is one side. He's got it cut out. He did the female pocket, put it all together, and one piece is thicker than the other, so it's got that nice little raise to it. But if you wanted it where it looked like it was sitting on the surface, where you couldn't see any edges or anything like that, he could have done this as a two-sided project, and done that step cut on the back side that would have fit into the pocket. And so this would have been sitting on the surface, and you wouldn't even know that it was actually recessed in there and stuff. But to answer your question, long story short, yes, that you can do that for sure. All right, let's go here. All right, let's switch back. And I know you guys weren't talking about me because I could hear you. I had my earpiece in, even though I was out in the way. So, but I heard you were talking about boxes and things like that, or something. I think I heard. JR, what were you saying?
That would you could also use that as a quick and dirty box jig, because you do that step down. That gives you the bottom and the lid. Yep. And then depending upon how much depth of cut you can get, you can turn around and carve all four sides out and get a continuous grain box down and dirty. And now you're going to line up.
Yep. For sure, you could do that, and it's a great even for something. Let's say like this little pillar box. Now this isn't it's not a step. It's not like a fitted lid. But little fitted lid boxes and pen boxes. I wish I had my pen box. But like pen and pencil sets, where the two lids fit together. It's a step. It's literally that step. So you could do that, it works. It's literally what you're doing, especially with that step. That's literally what you're doing. You're kind of creating that. That lid that sits on the surface, but also the part that goes inside the opening of your down and dirty box, right? So pretty cool stuff. All right. Now we're going to switch back over here. You guys can chill and relax again and everything. I got you We're going to switch back over to channel 2. Let's get me down in the corner again. Let's turn our wheels a little bit to a V-carve inlay. Now, the V-carve inlay method, there are, give me just a moment. Let me make sure I can see and hear and all that stuff. All right, everybody's there. Good. The V-carve inlay method, there is a series of steps and a process. Give me just a second here. And there's parts. Okay, we're going to call the female the pocket for this tutorial. We're going to call the female the pocket, and we're going to call the male the plug. All right, the plug that goes into the pocket. Now I'm going to draw out a simple scenario here. When it comes to the female, let me see if I can, bear with me just a moment. I'm going to take this. Let's make sure these two items are centered, otherwise it'll look funky. Let's go into node editing and I'm gonna click on this node right here, and I'm gonna use my arrow key on my keyboard, and I'm just gonna hit it twice, one more time, and then on this one, my left arrow key, 1, 2, 3. All right, let's go a little bit more dramatic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, don't do that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good enough. All right, let's go into control. Get out of node editing mode. Control, drag this over here for a moment. Take our scissors and trim that away. Wonderful. Give me just a minute. Make sure these two parts are centered with one another. And let's take this. Okay. So when it comes to a V-carve inlay, we have a female pocket, and then we have a male plug. Okay. Now, in the female pocket, and when it comes to your wood and your material and everything, the surface, and I'm just going to draw a line straight down, kind of like an arrow. And I'll put that right there for a minute, and I'm going to go into the draw text tool, and I'm going to call this Z0, right? Let's just use a simple text right there. So imagine, if you will, that this is our block of wood, and the top of this block is our Z0, the top of our board, right? So when it comes to the V-carve inlay or the V-carve toolpath, you know that there's a start depth and then there's a flat depth, right? And at the top of the V-carve toolpath. Well, in the case of the female, your start depth is 0, the top of your board. Your flat depth, let me get some text in here. We'll call this our flat depth. That is the bottom of the female pocket, right? So let's say that my start depth is 0 and my flat depth is 0.2, or let's round it up for a minute, 0.25, a quarter of an inch. The top of the female part is 0. The bottom of the pocket, that's the flat depth. So when you're creating that female pocket, that's the two numbers that you're going to use. Okay. Now, let's take the male part here and let's put that part in to our female here. And let me get it centered. Bear with me just a moment. Okay. Now there's going to come a time, or there's going to come a part when that male is going into the female, that the walls, because of the V-carve toolpath, it's only going to go so far. And the V shape of the female pocket and the V shape of the male plug, those walls are eventually going to make contact with each other as it goes down. And the space between the two parts that get created and everything, that's typically what they refer to as the glue gap, right? Well, let's take the part out for just a moment. Let's not move the whole thing. Let's take just the part back out for just a moment. And let's turn it upside down. So I'm going to hit the number 0 on the keyboard. I'm going to turn it upside down, just like if it was a board, a square board clamped on our table. And we need to know our I can't get my, we need to know our part. So Z0 for when we're calculating the male cut, let me hold down the control key and drag that over here, is going to be the top of our board, right? So that doesn't change. That's our Z0. Now remember, this is another blank piece of wood, square, nothing's been cut on it. And the top of the surface, the material surface, is Z0. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. Now, you're going to have your start depth. Okay? Now, the start depth is going to be the basically kind of the size of your glue gap that you want. And everything, it's the bit is going to be going down, and it's going to be cutting at a start depth and a flat depth, right? And so this lip right here on the male plug, let's call that the flat depth, right? So let's take a line and we'll draw a line out here, kind of we'll do like a little arrow pointing again. We'll take the word flat depth and we will copy that over to here, and we'll get everything all up close and personal right there. Okay, so this for the male cut is going to be your flat depth, but we also need a start depth. And what you will basically, the start depth, it kind of goes two ways. For this, when the two numbers are added together, start depth and flat depth, they need to equal the female cut's depth. So the larger the start depth and the smaller the flat depth, the smaller the gap is, the glue gap between the two parts. And so in this, I like a very small glue gap. Okay. For me, we're talking, let's say, a 1/16 of an inch. If anybody's there working metric or millimeters and all, 2 millimeters would be a good glue gap for you, about 0.078 in imperial terms. I'm trying to make the numbers kind of round and all. So for me, it's going to be a 1/16 of an inch. So if I come in here and say my total cut from 0 to the flat depth, right? The total cut has to equal the depth of my female pocket, then my flat depth for me, in this case, using the number that I just spit out, that's going to be a 1/16 of an inch. Okay. 625. My start depth is going to be the full cut of my female cut. So in this female cut, remember we said it was 0.25. If you remember earlier when I said, let's call this 1/4 of an inch deep, right? So for me, that's going to be 0.25 minus the 1/16 of an inch, 0.0625. And so 3/16. So I'm going to have a start depth of 0.1875 and a flat depth of a 1/16 of an inch. And those two numbers added together will total the total depth of my inlay cut. Now, I typically would use inlays typically aren't that deep and everything. The numbers that I use every single time for my inlay is 0.2 for a V-carve inlay. For me, 0.2 is my female cut. My male cut is 0.18. My flat depth is 0.02. 0.18 and 0.02 equals 0.2, right? In this case, I've added a little bit of a little bit of extra number. So our female cut is 0.25. So we're going to go a 1/16 for the flat depth, 3/16 for the start depth. And those two numbers added together have to equal the 0.25, and they do. So what's going to happen is this part now, let's get bear with me just a second. Let's come in here. Space bar. We'll call this the start depth. And we'll just call that right there. Let's get down and more realistic, and it's not the actual size, but the space right here between the start depth and the flat depth, that is going to be, come on over and move over here, that 0.0625, right? That's 1/16 of an inch. So the start depth in this case is 0.1875. That means the bit is going to come down to that start depth and start, it's kind of cut. And it's going to cut another 1/16 of an inch from there. And that's going to be, in a sense, kind of my glue gap. Now, what this comes into, translate into, is if I turn this part back over, and I'm putting the part in and everything, let me get it centered. Bear with me just a second. There we go. That gap, that spacing, when you are fitting the two parts together, typically there is when they're pressed together and you've got them glued in and weight on it and all that stuff, or you've got it pressed down while it dries. When it's all said and done, there's generally a gap right here. And then of course there's the gap at the bottom, your glue gap and stuff. The space here is we have that space there so that we can use a saw to cut. And we can use the saw to cut in between there, or a band saw, hand saw, Hell, we can take it and put it back on our CNC table and let our end mill the top surface off and everything till it's all flush. But typically with a V-carve inlay, there's a gap there. Now the gap, that's my 1/16 of an inch gap right here. Okay, this space here. It doesn't mean that my glue gap or the space down here is going to be a 1/16. You know, they're not always going to be the same. Your glue gap is basically the flat depth that you put in here. Let me see how I can say this. My thickness of my material of the mill, that thickness of the material with the start depth and that 1/16 of an inch flat depth is going to leave space here. And that space is the 1/16 of an inch. That's our flat depth, right? That's that space there. Well, how wide or how thick my actual material is for the male inlay versus that full 1/4 inch cut of the female, that thickness of my material minus the 0.25, okay, the 0.25, my 1/16 of an inch gap, whatever's left when you're doing the subtraction and all, that's how much gap is going to be down here in the bottom of the glue gap. And I know that just lost a lot of people saying that. We have to imagine ourselves cutting from the top down. Our CNC cuts from the top of the board down, right? So our male is upside down. When it's in the female, it's right side up, right? So our start depth and our flat depth, in my case, the 1/16 of an inch, that's the air gap between the two parts when they are fit together in their most tightest fit, when the walls make contact and you can't press it down anymore. That air gap where my saw is going to cut or my band saw or whatever, that is my flat depth, that 1/16 of an inch. Okay. The size of my mel plug with that 1/16 of an inch gap here and the, the material here, as far as, my thickness of my material minus that 1/4 of an inch, that's what leaves left here. From the top of the bottom down to there, that's a 1/4. I know it looks bigger than a 1/4 because we're exaggerating the drawing here, but imagine that this is a 1/4 from this line to here. And if my material is 3/8, then this material right here, okay, let's say that if this is a 1/4 and my material is 3/8, that is going to be that extra 1/8 of an inch, right? So that's going to be that thickness. That waste, it's waste. It's what gets milled away, sanded away, cut away, and all that. This is waste. So let me see if I can. I don't want to confuse everybody. Well, this will make sense in just a second when we actually put a real toolpath together. We'll call this the waste. And I'm going to kind of split it on that line right there. That, because that gets milled away, right? And the waste actually, if I'm being realistic, is actually from here. Let me hit escape. The waste, if I'm being realistic, is actually from here up to here. All of this material right here, this waste material, where the basically the two parts kind of fit in together and everything, that all is going to end up getting milled away, because the inlay is going to be sanded flush with one another and stuff. So all of this area right here is gone. And it looks exaggerated. Like, how come this gap is bigger than this gap? That's because it's not drawn to scale. Okay, I'm just freehanding this stuff, guys. So follow along with me the best you can. And we want minimal, spacing and everything, and minimal kind of, glue gap. So the lower this number and the higher this number, the shallower or the less space that we're going to have here. And back in the day, they used to have the female getting cut to 0.3, and then the male start at 0.1 and the female start at 0.1, the flat depth at 0.1, or 0.15 and 0.15 for a total of 0.3 inch cut, right? And it left, when these two parts and everything, it left a big gap here, a big void. Well, if I'm doing an inlay within an inlay and I'm gluing in one part and then I'm coming back and gluing in again, there's a possibility that I end up cutting into this air gap and everything. So that kind of has been corrected over the years to where we don't want big numbers. We want our flat depth to be as minimal as possible. It's got to be something, can't be nothing. But we want it as minimal as possible. And our start depth is going to be the larger number when it comes to the male. But either way, they both have to add up. And there's no right or wrong. There's no set numbers, as long as it adds a quarter. So I could do an eighth and an eighth, right? Eighth start, eighth flat. But that's going to give me a big glue gap, a big void at the bottom of my inlay. If I could do 0.21 for the start depth and 0.04. Yeah, 0.04. Those two numbers equal a quarter of an inch, right? I could, and then that's going to give me a really small glue gap. So we're just larger number, the deeper the start depth, the shallower the flat depth, the less glue gap we're going to have. And for me, 1/16 of an inch, that is still in itself, that's a pretty decent sized gap and all. Now, if I was using my numbers, and the reason why my numbers, if I was creating an actual toolpath for my female, my number would be 0 start depth for the female pocket and 0.2. And the reason why 0.2 is my number, my go-to number, is because most of my V-carves are using a 60-degree V-bit. To be more specific, I'm using the Whiteside 1541 60-degree V-bit, which is a 1/4 inch shank, and it comes down to a 60-degree point. It looks like a sharpened pencil. The cutter blade on that V-bit, the length from the tip to the top of the cutter before the shank starts, is 0.21. So my flat depth, my pocket cut, and my male cut and everything, when it's all said and done, I'm hogging away all that waste material to do the male cut, I can't have it exceed 0.21. Otherwise, my shank is going to be burning into the material when it's trying to cut the male part out and everything. So the cutting parameters are based off of my bit's limitations, if you will. It's not really a limitation, but 0.2 is my maximum depth of cut on that particular bit. So that's what I work with. So for the female, it's 0 and 0.2. And for the male cut, I go 0.18 for the start depth, 0.02 for the flat depth, and that 20 thousandths of an inch, that's, how much my space and everything, it's minimal, super minimal, because the fit, it doesn't require a whole lot of glue. It doesn't have to be saturated with glue and everything, like a big old puddle, and all. A little I can't say a little dab will do you, but it doesn't require a whole lot. So these are my numbers when I'm using a 60-degree V-bit, my white side 1541 60-degree V-bit, which again, the cutting height of it from the tip to the top of the cutter before the shank starts is 0.21, so I can't exceed that. It's all based on your bit and all what you're doing. Let's take a look at some photo examples of a tutorial that's on YouTube that kind of illustrates this drawing very well, but it's a deep inlay. And the deep inlay, let me see if I can make all these screens tile and all. Let me bear with me just a moment. Give me just a second here. Let's see if I can illustrate this. All right. So on the screen, and I'll make everything bigger as we go through and all. When you're doing things like, just a regular project board, let's say a piece of furniture, the front of your dresser drawer or, a cabinet door or something like that, your inlay doesn't need to be very deep. A 0.2 deep pocket for me is a deep enough inlay to do the cut. For what I need, for just my regular decorative inlays. When I'm doing something like a cutting board or a butcher block that's going to get inlaid, and a great example is Brion Wood, BRIONN Wood. They make beautiful. He makes beautiful inlay cutting boards, and check out his YouTube channel and stuff. But because those boards get fluids and juices, and it could possibly get thrown into a dishwasher for whatever reason, and things like that, we need a much deeper inlay. We need that male plug to be in a female pocket of some depth, right? So that we don't worry about if it does sit in the sink with water on it or in a dishwasher and all, that something's not going to happen and our inlay is just going to kind of fall out or something, right? We want something deep. And so to illustrate off of, his instruction, and it's called Deep Inlay, on YouTube, the video tutorial. I wish I could, I want to give him proper credit because he has it's a beautiful tutorial when instructing deep inlays, and I encourage everyone to go watch it at some point in time in their life. Let me pull up his video. Inlay. Stefan Vercelis. I hope I pronounced his last name right. Stefan does a beautiful job. Deep Inlay V-carving detail tutorial in Vectric V-carve, right? That's the name of the title. Deep Inlays V-carving detailed tutorial with Vectric V-carve. It is a beautiful tutorial, well explained, and he's got all kinds of graphics and things. These are these screenshots are some of the graphics screenshotted from his video, but he does a phenomenal job of making it make sense and why we would want to do, what we need to do for a deep inlay. Now, when it comes to an inlay, V-carve inlay, whether it's a deep inlay or a shallow inlay, you have your glue space, everything that we just talked about. You have your clearance, that air gap between the two parts when the two parts fit together. You have your plug depth, which is the, think of, again, it's upside down, but this is Z0 for the plug, and this is the flat depth for the plug, and that, from start to finish, that's called the plug depth, right? And then the pocket depth, of course, is from Z0 on the female down to the bottom of the female cut, right? So those are the parts and everything that more elegantly laid out in his illustration versus mine. But this is the parts of an inlay, regardless of whether it's a deep inlay or a shallow inlay. That's what it is. You've got your glue gap, you've got your plug that fits into your female pocket, and then you have your clearance, and each of them have their own size and stuff. Now, when it comes to the numbers and things, imagine, if you will, in his deep inlay and all, he is using, it's a number that I like, 1 millimeter, 0.039. That is his glue gap. Okay, 0.039 imperial, 1 millimeter, and all. He works in metric, but that is his glue space. He likes, for his deep inlays, he likes a 2 millimeter gap. And that number, that gap millimeter, that's an important number for him, because that's his flat depth when carving the male part. That's the flat depth. So that space, that gap where the saw cut is, he illustrates the saw there, that is the flat depth. So he likes a 2 millimeter flat depth. So whatever, his plug part is and everything, for him, his female in this illustration, he's using an 8 millimeter deep cut for the female. Now in imperial, you're talking about 0.315, a little under 3/8 of an inch. This is a deep inlay again for like a butcher block or something like that, right? So 0.315. So that he's going a full 8 millimeter for that female pocket cut, right? Well, the male plug, which is the part that sits flush, and it's illustrated by these two arrows here. The part that sits flush plus that air gap, for the top, the gap, 7 millimeters and 2 millimeters, that's his start depth and flat depth when setting up the male part. His female part is 8 millimeters. Start depth is 0. Pocket flat depth is 8 millimeters. But for the male cut, his start depth is 7 millimeters and his flat depth is 2 millimeters, right? 7, 8, 9. Now, that difference of 1 millimeter, okay, 7, 8, 9, that difference of 1 millimeter is his glue gap, right? So the total cut for his male, is 9 millimeters in total, right here, this middle arrow. That's the, Z0 down to the bottom cut. It's total of 9 millimeters, 7 for the start depth, 2 for the flat depth. And that 9 millimeters, when it fits into the 8 millimeter plug, it's only going to be able to go so far before the two walls hit. That's going to leave 1 millimeter of glue space for him, right, for his deep cuts. Now, the translations from millimeters to inches, it's just numbers, right? So don't get hung up on the millimeters and all. It's basically his start depth for him is 0.275. His flat depth is 0.0787, right? That's the 2 millimeters and all. But the whole total, all the way through that 9 millimeter total for his male part, 8 millimeters goes into the plug, and then, 7 millimeters fits into the plug, and that 1 millimeter goes in. That's the glue gap, and the remaining 2 millimeters that's that space that the saw cuts through, right? So no matter if it's imperial or if it's metric, it all translates the same. Now, this is deep. This is big. This is a deep inlay for like a butcher block or a cutting board or something like that. When we're doing dresser drawers and tabletops and whatever, just a piece of art hanging on the wall, we don't need to go very big. For me, my inlay part is based off of my router bit. 0.2 is the deepest my 60-degree V-bit can cut. So that's the depth of my female pocket. My male is 0.18 for the start depth, 0.02 for the flat depth. That is my parameters. Those two numbers equal that 0.2, right? It could be whatever you want. Now, here's the thing. Just to kind of finish up, showing his tutorials and everything for the illustrations and all, to show that male part, Z0 is the top of our board, 7 millimeters down, that's the start depth, 2 millimeters is the flat depth, and that gets a total of 9 millimeters, right? So that's how it's laid out. And for me, same thing, 0.2, 0.2 is our full cut, 0.18 is the start depth, 0.02 is the flat depth, and those two numbers just have to total, and everything. The thing about deep inlays, you can't use, like my 60-degree V-bit, the white side 1541, can't use it. It's not going to give you, it doesn't have enough of a cutter to get down deep like that. Some 60-degree V-bits, with a 1/2-inch head, still don't have enough cutter height and everything. What I would recommend that everybody have, if they're going to be into doing inlays, V-carve inlays, whether they're shallow or whether they're deep or whatever the case may be, somewhere in your arsenal of tools, you should have either a white side SC50 22-degree V-bit carving liner, nice narrow walls, 11-degree half angle, 22-degree full angle, right? Or a 15-degree V-bit, I don't care what brand name, which is a 7.5-inch side angle, 15-degree included angle, right? The whole angle of the V-bit. A 15-degree V-bit or the 22, I don't care. Both or either one of those will give you good depth for doing deep V-carve inlays in things like cutting boards and butcher blocks and stuff. And then your 60 and your 90 and stuff like that, they're going to be fine for your shallow inlays. You're just your regular everyday, like a top of a jewelry box type of thing inlay, right? You don't need that real narrow wall. But if your thing is going to be, I want to do some really cool inlays in a cutting board for my customers or this or that, get yourself either a 22-degree carving liner, the white side SC50, or a 15-degree V-bit, which is 7.5-degree half angle. I don't know. I don't have a good 15-degree brand like V-bit like to recommend and all. But toolstoday.com would be probably a good resource for that, or Amazon, right? One of the two and everything. The white side SC50 22-degree carving liner, 11-degree half angle, that gives you good depth, right? But if you need more, that bit's got to get narrower, right? So the 7.5-degree side angle, 15-degree included, versus an 11-degree side angle, 22-degree, you'll get more longer cutting depth and everything, and narrower cuts and stuff. So it's good to have choices and things. So by a show of hands, because I really want this to resonate and everything, by a show of hands or thumbs up or I got it or I don't got it or whatever, do you understand the anatomy of the female and the male parts, and Z0 versus flat depth on the female, Z0 versus flat depth on the male, and that the start depth on the female is the 0. It's the top of the board, 0. The flat depth on the female is how deep you want the pocket to cut. When it comes to the male, the start depth is not Z0, it's always going to be a larger number because we want however much gap between the two parts when they fit together. We're going to have a large number and then a smaller number for the flat depth. And for me, like I said, I'm 0.18 and 0.02. It could be 0.17 and 0.03. It could be 0.16 and 0.04. I don't care as long as the two numbers add up to 0.2 when it's all said and done. It really just depends on, you know, how big you want your space and your glue gap. But all in all, no matter what, only, you know, 8 millimeters in this case, 0.8 basically, the 0.18, should I say, in this case, is what's going to be fitting into my female, right? It's I'm going to have a microscopic glue gap, and I'm going to have a very minimal gap up here because I don't use saws, bandsaw or handsaw, to cut my two parts apart. I clamp the board back on the table and I let my CNC mill that surface off, you know, that waste area, all this waste right here, all of this waste. My CNC will come and mill that, leaving just a few thousandths of an inch that I'll sand with my orbital sander, you know, to the finished touch and everything. So I don't need a gap big enough for my saw kerf. But if you are using a bandsaw, if you are using a handsaw, a little, am I using the proper term, guys? If I say a dovetail saw, that's not a flush trim saw, If you're using a handsaw or a flush trim saw or something, then you want to make sure that you give yourself enough of a gap, the distance between your start depth and your flat depth, for the saw kerf to fit into, right? But if you're going to do the same thing where you let your CNC mill it down and all, then you don't need to really worry about that. Just know that all this is waste, right? All right. So let's take a look at let's create an actual project, but I know that it gets confusing and it can get lost in translation, especially with me jumping from imperial to metric and stuff. The process, once you kind of understand, you know, what's happening and everything, and know the parts and know why you're doing your start depth here and your flat depth here and things like that, then it's just kind of, you know, rinse and repeat. And my numbers, because when I'm always using my 60-degree V bit, my numbers are always my numbers, 0.18, 0.02, and 0.2 for the female. So it's just rinse and repeat. All I have to do is, you know, grab my design and go. Now, there's one important step with a V-carve inlay that's not taken with a straight inlay, and it's mirroring the part. So we have to think about, we have our male sitting here and our female sitting there, and just like, you know, two slices of bread coming together for a sandwich, we are flipping that male to go into the female. And if we don't mirror and flip our male part before we tool path it, then when we take that part and flip it over into the female, it's not going to match up. If I don't flip it, period, and I just have the same vector for male and female, well, when I flip it, it's going to be opposite, right? So it's definitely not going to fit together, you know. So we always have to mirror the male, and we're going to actually draw this out in a real design now, so it kind of can make some sense. I'm going to get to this leaf in just a second, but let's do a design that that has a little bit of detail. I'm going to import a vector. This peacock here. And these files I'm going to make available for everyone. And for this particular inlay, it's intricate. It's not going to fit on that little bitty board. Let's make that board a little bit bigger. Let's go, I'm going to go 12 inches tall. We'll go 12 inches wide. And for the thickness of my actual project, this is my project board now, right? I'm going to go 3/4. Okay. And I'm going to take this peacock and center it and size it and everything. And this is going to be my inlay. Now I'm using just one species of wood, contrasting colors. Let's say that my main board is a walnut board, and, being typical, with every contrasting color, we'll use maple for the male inlay, right? And everything. But be creative. We can do all kinds of fun things. Just make sure that when the contrasting colors or the contrasting materials come together, that after the finish put on, that it's not almost so similar that you can't even see the inlay. I've done that, and it sucks, to say the least. Be right back. Let me show an example of a bad inlay job. Okay, so let me size me up real quick, real big for just a second so you can all see me. Let's go full screen and let's turn that off. Okay, let's hide all my keyboard and paper towels and all. All right, so this is a pedestal table that was carved on a rotary axis, but the lids and all the parts here, the round part underneath, the square part there, square part down here, that was all just, cut on the CNC and everything, cut round part. Well, the top here is zebra wood, right? Well, your boy, Laney, thought that a walnut inlay would look good in a zebra wood top. No, it doesn't. You can barely see it. Now, luckily, you can see it now because the light is shining right on it. You can see it. But in the contrast of things, it doesn't even stand out, right? Bad design. Cool, design that it would have been, but bad choice of color combination, right? So, keep that in mind, the finished part now. Beautiful little table. It sits in my living room, and I don't show it off too much because I screwed up. That was a screw up, right? It is what it is. All right. So let me visit with the boys for a second, make sure they're doing all right. You guys awake? I surprised you. I threw you on screen without warning you ahead of time. So, but y'all doing okay?
Yeah.
Good.
You're not pulling your hair out going, what the hell is he talking about? It's hard to I really think Stefan, that deep inlay, if you're searching on YouTube, type in V-carve inlay, and on the thumbnails it's the YouTube play button. It's a square block with a YouTube play button that he inlaid into the block, and it says deep inlays. That is that's a great tutorial. He does a really it's 45-minute long video, and he does a phenomenal job just explaining all the parts and why we want deep inlays for cutting boards and butcher blocks and all that. And he makes some beautiful. He's kind of almost like the Breon Wood, he makes those kind of things. He's good stuff. He's a good teacher. But you guys following along okay, or am I losing you? I need to backtrack.
Got it.
All right.
Makes sense.
All right, let's get back to it and see how much more I can fill you with. Let me answer a quick question here. Ron Bishop said, I just done a cutting board a few weeks ago, and I used the white side 22-degree V-bit, and it turned out great. Exactly, Ron. So that's awesome. That 22-degree V-bit gives you good depth and everything, and it's real good. Now, I do want to, since I brought up Stefan and his tutorial and everything, I do want to emphasize that when we have a large start depth, right, your bit is going to start, it's going to plunge into that material. Now, if I am inlaying into, all right, let's pretend, hold on a second. Let's pretend that this box, I don't have a piece of wood or anything like that, but let's pretend that this box is my board. And let's pretend that I've milled some of that material away, right? I've already cut a pocket in here. Let's say the pocket is 3/8 of an inch deep and all, whatever the case may be, but that material is gone. And my start depth is the top of my board. When I say start at 3/16, because there's no wood there, that's okay. It's going to start at 3/16 and it's going to go down and cut, deeper. But if this was a solid block of wood and I tell it the start depth of 3/16, it's going to plunge 3/16, and that's not a deep cut. But if you're doing deep inlays and you have a large, start depth, you're shoving your bit through material that's not gone. And one of the things, and let me switch back large for this next part of what I'm about to say with regards to that. Let's go back over to here. Is let me emphasize this. What Stefan instructs and everything is good practice, is breaking your male cut when there's a deep start depth, and everything, breaking it in to multiple passes, whether it be 1, 2, in his case, he does 3. So in his example, if you remember 0.9 or 9 millimeters was his full cut depth, right? He had 7 millimeter start depth and a 2 millimeter flat depth. Well, instead of doing that full 7 millimeters, of a cut, which is, 0.27 inches down, instead of shoving that bit, over 1/4 of an inch deep to start the cut before it, because that's just where it starts, ladies and gentlemen. You have to understand that it's going to, it doesn't start there and then come and then drop down another 2 millimeters. That's where it shoves the bit down to, but it's cutting all the way, the full 9 millimeters in one pass. And 9 millimeters is, 0.354. So just under 3/8 of an inch deep. So if I have a start depth of 7 millimeters and a flat depth of 2 millimeters, that total cut depth is 9 millimeters. And with a V-carve toolpath, your bit is just starting here. I mean, it's starting, it's going down to that position, but it's cutting the full 9 millimeters in one pass. We don't, now if there's no wood, right? If I've already milled away a pocket and I'm just carving down the pocket, yeah, it's going to go down and there's air there, right? So I'm not doing anything. But if I'm carving into a blank board, a 9 millimeter cut, which is 0.354 inches deep, just under 3/8, that is a big aggressive cut with a V bit, right? So what Stefan, explains when something like that and everything, because it is taking it in one pass, he demonstrates how he, sets up his cuts, his male cut, into 3 separate steps, right? He'll start with a 1.5 millimeter cut depth. Let me get my keyboard back there so I keep typing right. Which is a little under a 1/16 of an inch, right? So that'll be a start depth for his first pass, but his number is always consistent. He's going 2 millimeters from there, 2 millimeter flat depth, always the same. The flat depth is the same. So that 1.5 to 2 millimeter, the total, if you add those two numbers together, is 3.5 millimeters. So that's his first pass. Okay. And then from there, his start depth on his second pass is starting at 4.5 millimeters, cutting another 2 millimeters. And so 4.5 plus 2 it is actually only 3 millimeters, because 1.5 millimeters of that material is already gone, right? So he's only taken another 3 millimeters from there. And then from there, now he's already cut, you know, what with those 2 passes, he has gone 6.5 millimeters deep, right? So that's, you know, the first 2 passes, very shallow cuts and easy to get to, right? The third pass does the final to that 9 millimeter depth. So he's starting at 7 millimeters, which is only, you know, 0.5 millimeters more than where he's already gotten for the first 2 passes. Because you take the 3 millimeter, 3.5, 4.5 here, right? That's only 1.5 millimeters, so a 1/16 of an inch. His second pass is just carving a 1/16 of an inch more material. It's starting a 1/16 of an inch deeper, right? And then that 6.5 millimeters, he's going to 7, because his flat depth is 2. He only needs 9, so 7 plus 2. So he's only going 0.5 millimeters down for that third pass. But when all 3 passes are done, he has created his 9 millimeter cut. And that's the goal. But your flat depth is the same for every pass you do. He's just taking it in steps. So his bit is not taking 3/8 of an inch in one pass. God, that just, I can't imagine it. Right. So deep inlays require multiple passes. And Stefan, I hope his name is Stefan, not Steven. Stefan, I think it's Stefan because he's overseas. But he does a beautiful job explaining it. It's a 45-minute tutorial that I think everybody should watch. Everybody should watch his video. It's great and everything. Now, in my case, I'm doing a basic inlay. Okay. Let's call it the top of a jewelry box or something like that, or what have you. It could be the, the side of a box too or something, but I'm doing a basic inlay here. And I don't need a deep V-bit for this project. I'm going to go with my 60-degree V-bit. I need to, first things first, before I kind of get started and everything with the toolpath, let me get rid of all of this stuff. Delete all. The first thing I do is I kind of, let me get my vector set up for my male and my female. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to hold down the control key. And I'm going to drag a copy over here. And I'm going to mirror this copy. Go into the mirror tool. Not a mirror copy. I'm just going to flip it horizontally. So it's facing the other way. And then I'm going to put a boundary around this. And a rectangle boundary is fine. It could be whatever shape you want it to be. Let me get that. Now, if your boundary, and I'm going to create a whole nother sheet because we have version 11.554, so I can create multiple sheets, one for the female, one for the male. I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to call this my male inlay. It's going to be the same size material. My sheet 1, we'll call that my female inlay. Female pocket. Okay. So I got my female and my male there. And I'm going to take these 2 vectors, my mirrored copy, and I'm going to move them over to that sheet. And then I'm going to center them on that sheet. Well, don't let that leaf, what is that leaf all about? It's not part of our project yet. Okay. Now, on this male inlay, when the router bit is going to cut, it's going to cut just like doing raised text. It's going to cut all the material away around that inlay and everything. And if my vector, if my outline is, let's say it's, let's say it doesn't go to the edge of my board. Let's say I'm just kind of in here. I just have to know that whatever sides are left, let's say that, I have, let me do something like this. When that whole pocket gets removed and everything in here, those 4 sides, I'm going to have to cut off, whether I run it through a table saw, a band saw, a hand saw, or whatever. But, when it pockets this out and everything on the male, these remaining material that, hasn't been carved and all, that's got to get cut off, get rid of it and everything. What I tend to do is I'm going to have clamps here, or I'm going to have two-sided tape, or whatever the case may be. I don't want tabs, so I like two-sided tape. And if I'm doing two-sided tape, my vector, and thought popped in my head, your male part is not always, the material for the male part is not always going to be the same size as your female. You might have a jewelry box lid that you're cutting an inlay on, and the male is only, let's say 4x4. Your male part that you're cutting out, you might be cutting that out of a small 5x5 piece. It just so happens that my peacock here is taking up a good chunk of this 12x12. So my vector is just about the same size. What I would typically tend to do is my vector would slightly be in a situation like this. I don't care if it's my 12x12, 6x6, 5x4, 4, whatever my board is. I don't want to have to run that board through a table saw or a band saw or a hand saw and all to cut those edges off. I'm going to have two-sided tape holding that part down, and my boundary is going to be offset just slightly larger. I like a 16th. Outward, so that when I'm cutting this male away, cutting all that material away and everything, I don't have it gets to the edges, basically. I don't have to worry about, cutting them off. That's me, right? You do whatever you got to do. Just know, you need a flat surface, right? Because you got to be able to fit this inlay into the female. All right. So I have my female pocket here. We'll do that one first. And my male over here. Let's get rid of this leaf for now, so we can see those two side by side. Two important facts. Male is mirrored, and there's a boundary around it. Okay? Always for a V-carve inlay. Male is mirrored, boundary. Don't care what the shape of the boundary is. It could be an offset of the peacock. It doesn't have to be a rectangle. It could be a star. It could be, hell, it could be anything. Wiggly line, as long as it's an offset. And as long as when the material gets milled away, you have kind of a flat surface that's not going to interfere with the inlay fitting into the female. So for my female cut, I'm going to do a V-carve inlay in this situation. My 60-degree V-bit is going to be my go-to here. I'm going to have a start depth 0.18. Again, these are my numbers. They don't have to be yours. 0.02. Okay. And that's a lie. I just gave you the numbers for the male cut. We're doing the female. So my start depth is going to be 0, and my male cut's going to be 0.2. Or my flat depth is going to be 0.2. We're cutting the female first. In this case, I told you in the other inlay, the straight inlay, I said always cut your male part first. And I've got that stuck in my head. This is the female. We're going to cut the female. 0 start depth, 0.2 flat depth. The reason why I'm 0.2 is because I'm using a 60-degree V-bit that only has a 0.21 cutting blade height, and I can't exceed that. Okay. I'll show you what would happen if I did, and why it's a thing. Okay. In this case, no clearance tool, just that straight 60-degree V-bit. This is going to be my female pocket, and calculate. And I spelled female wrong because I did. Okay. All right. When we preview this cut, it's going to give me, this depth. Here's the kicker, ladies and gentlemen. If I were to try to use a 90-degree V-bit on this cut right here, giving these parameters and stuff like that, based on the space between the two lines that it's carving between and the angle of the V-bit being used, that determines the depth of the cut. Okay? Even though I have my flat depth set at 0.2, that 0.2 doesn't mean every part of my V-carve is cutting down to 0.2. Basically, what a flat depth is, for those of you that are new to Vectric and everything, a flat depth is a limit. I am limiting my cut to 0.2. So any part of my design that would normally exceed 0.2, it is going to get limited to that. It's flat depth. It's going to get flattened off. But every other part of my design that will not exceed 0.2, it's just going to carve to whatever depth it carves to, based on the angle of the V-bit. Now, because these lines are so small and intricate and everything, if I use a wide angle V-bit on this, I'm going to have a shallow cut, which means I'm going to have a very small pocket. And that means I'm going to have a very small inlay going into that small pocket, and I'm going to have a very weak inlay. It won't be, too structurally sound. It won't be able to take a beating. I would be worried that if I used a damp cloth to wipe the dust off the top of my box, that moisture would cause, and there's going to be a clear coat and a finish and all that stuff, but still, it's small. It's a weak inlay, right? If there's any wood movement, it's going to pop out or something. I don't know, but I use a 60 is my. I've never used a 90. Will never use a 90 in an inlay. But some people in their videos, they teach a 90 and all, and that's their go-to and stuff. But if I'm doing an intricate inlay and everything, the minimum. Would you call it the minimum? Because the maximum number, the maximum angle I would go is 90, right? Or 60. I want a 60 degree. So that's going to give me some depth, because my small areas are going to be shallow to begin with, right? Only 32nd of an inch deep on that part right there, 0.05, just under a 16th of an inch, kind of thing. So, not everything is carving to 0.2. Just some of the parts, 22 degree V-bit gets narrower, deeper, right? Even though my lines are smaller, they're going to be a deeper cut. So the narrower the angle, the more depth that we'll get in an inlay and everything and stuff. And so keep that in mind. So in this case, I'm using a 60. This would be fine for a 60, fine, great for a 22 and all that. Not good for a 90, in my opinion. All right. So this is the female, right? So we've got that female cut. Wonderful, beautiful. Started at 0, the top of the board, cut down to 0.2. It limited the cut. And then all the small areas, they just cut to whatever depth they were going to cut to. Okay. So that is my female. Now, in a contrasting piece of wood, something that's really going to pop, when it gets glued in and everything, I've got my male cut here. My male cut is going to be the same V-carve, same bit, use the same bit, always the same bit for both cuts. I'm going to start, in my case, 0.18, 0.02. 60 degree V-bit. Now, there's a lot of material around here. Okay, a lot of material that's going to get milled away and everything. And it would be ridiculous of me, especially on a 12 by 12 board here, to use my V-bit to do all that work. So I'm going to throw in a clearance tool. On smaller inlays and smaller mill parts, when you're cutting it out, not necessary. Let your V-bit just do all the work. It'll be fine, because all the tool grooves that the V-bit's going to leave behind in that flat area, that's all waste anyway. It's getting cut off. It's not even going to be, it's not going to affect your inlay at all. But on something this large, I'm not going to wait forever and let the tip of my V-bit do all the flat work. I'm going to throw in, a larger end mill. And I'm just going to do one. An 1/8 of an inch is kind of my go-to. It helps me. It's a flat bit. It'll help me, mill that. If you wanted to, you could add a 1/4 inch and all as well too. If it was a large, this is 12 by 12, so it is a large area. I mean, I could go with a 1/4 inch end mill, and fine, whatever the end mill, where it can't fit, the V-bit's going to take over and do the flat work anyway, right? I don't really see a need to use a bunch of tool changes for your mill cut. It's not necessary. We don't have to do a raster cut like most cases when we're rastering with the grain to minimize sanding and all that. Not necessary. Offset is fine, for your cuts. I'm going to use an 1/8 inch bit to do some of my flat work, and I'm not going to stress over any more than that. Make sure that your vector is mirrored. Make sure you have your boundary around there, and make sure both of those are selected when you calculate the tool path. So as you can see here in the blue, that's the area, the purplish blue, that's the area that's getting milled away. This is the area that's left. So let's take a look at the actual finish cut of this. And on this, my inlay, the total depth of my inlay cut is 0.2, right? And of that, hell, I'm going to have a small micro glue gap. The full 0.2 isn't going to fit down in there. So if I'm using a 3/4 inch board to cut the mill out of, there's a lot of waste there, right? So in some cases, it might make sense to use, since your inlay is not going to be very deep. In this case, use a smaller board if you have it, but that's another milling process. You would be surfacing it down with your CNC or running it through a planer or a drum sander, whatever the case may be, to get rid of that waste. It's kind of 6 1 half dozen another. It's still going to get wasted away unless you have a need to resaw a board. Let's say it's a small part. Let's say that I have a 3/4 inch board. I can resaw that in half and have 2 3/8 inch pieces. And that gives me 2 pieces that I can use for 2 separate inlays. And I'm not milling away and wasting 3/8 of an inch of material that I could throw into another inlay kind of thing. That would make sense. On something like this, where it's a big piece, I don't think I would have a need for a 3/8 inch, 12 by 12 again or something. And my bandsaw can only do, I think it's 14 inches. So I could resaw this if I wanted to save it for later. Whatever. But in this case, when I mill this away and everything, it's going to create my mill part, and then all the rest of the meat back there from that flat depth on is waste. It gets milled away. It gets, thrown away. So if you're a frugal woodworker, resaw your material, make it only as thick as you need to make it, and, go from there. There's no need to waste wood if you don't have to. Now, on this particular part here and everything, we're going to zoom in up close and personal on it when it's as it's carving here. Let me get up to it. The reason why a mill inlay is the way it is, and the reason why we have it on a backer board, could you imagine if it was like a traditional inlay where you actually cut the mill out and you glue it into the female? All these little bitty parts and everything being cut out, and then you're sitting there with tweezers trying to fit them in and things like that. Oh my God. Well, by doing it out of, thicker material and having that flat depth, so it's a backer board. It keeps everything together. So it's just like you're dealing with one big piece of wood to glue it in and everything. And that's great. But in this case, these parts and all, they're going to be, they're small and everything. But again, my female pocket isn't that deep, so, and all. So this is the mill part. And again, everything from the flat depth down to the very bottom is all waste. So it is what it is. But that is going to get, I'm going to glue. I don't glue. Some people in their videos, they're gluing both sides. They're throwing glue on the male and glue on the female, right? They're filling the pocket, just flooding the pocket, and then they're flooding the male part, you know, and everything. I don't flood the male part. I'll make sure I got good glue in the little nooks and crannies and crevices of my female, and then my male goes in. I do not add glue to my male part and the female. It's one or the other. It's whatever I'm feeling frisky about. I'll either make sure every edge and thing, you know, I've got a nice good layer of glue on my male, and then my female is empty. I'm not going to add glue to it. Or I'm going to put glue in my female and then just glue the male in. And why I would change from one to the other is if I am if I got a real intricate female pocket and everything, and a bunch of little areas to kind of, you know, fill in and all, and I'm trying to get a glue brush down into the little nooks and crannies, and I'm not confident that I'm getting down where I need to get down into, then I'm just going to glue the male part. I'm going to make sure I got a good glue film on my male to fit into the female. Also in the female, I don't want to slather glue all over the surface that eventually when those two parts go together, I'm going to have a little bit of squeeze out anyway, but I'm not, if I'm just, you know, being quick about my glue up and I'm saturating my female pocket and getting glue all over the surface, when I glue this together and I mill off that surface, I've got all these glue stains that I got to make sure that I sand that gone because it's going to show up in my finish, right? If I glue the male sticking up, the male parts and everything, then when I'm coming over to, you know, fit it in and everything, yeah, there's going to be drippage on the surface and all, but because that glue, I'm putting a thin coat on those angles and all, that glue's inside the female. And also this is ingrain. This male part here, it's ingrain that you just exposed, right? So it's going to soak up some of that anyway, right? And all. So, it just really depends on what you're doing. It's one or the other. I'm not going to harp on all that. Just do whatever side you want. There's no need to glue both sides. It's just a waste of glue, and it's a lot of mess to clean up. It'll be enough. And so and by the way, if you put a lot of glue in your female and everything, when the two parts are fitting together, you're creating kind of a vacuum, right? The parts are already fitting together snug on those angled walls. And when you're pushing down and you're clamping, you know, you got weight on this and everything. And like, let's say I throw a brick on the top of my inlay because, that'll be enough weight. Or I'll throw my 25-pound weight from my weight bench on top of it, or whatever the case may be, that'll be enough weight. If I've got a saturated female pocket in there and there's like a vacuum, it's like a pillow, like a cushion where the glue can't squeeze out or escape, and my inlay's not actually fitting down in there, because you know, I flooded the female, then I'm going to have a very crappy result, right? So that's a kind of another thing to watch out for. Don't saturate. Just get enough glue in there to on the walls and stuff to do its job. All right, let's bring the boys up. You guys, wake up, wake up, wake up. If you're sleeping, if I put everybody to sleep, you two in the audience, y'all wake up. We got some questions and everything, but Daryl says, which produces better results, straight or V-carve? Let me ask the guys here. Doug, have you ever done an inlay, V-carve inlay, or straight?
No.
Okay.
No,
JR,
I haven't.
have you ever done an inlay?
I've done an inlay, but the V-carve version.
Okay. John, you done inlay, straight or V-carve? Oh, you're muted, John. Unmute yourself there, bud.
I've done a V-carve inlay with the combination of epoxy. All right.
Ooh,
Because I wanted different colors, and I didn't have that color wood.
Yeah. Oh no, that's awesome. So Daryl's question is, which produces better results, straight or V-carve? I'm going to say V-carve inlay. The reason why I'm going to say V-carve inlay is because if you look at the intricate details of the tail feathers of this peacock and everything, those fine little points and stuff, and everything, we wouldn't be able to do that with a straight inlay, Daryl. We would be limited by the radius of our bit. In a 16th inch radius bit, I'm probably going to be getting cut off back here somewhere, and I won't get that nice detail on those points on that on this particular type of inlay, or any kind of inlay with any kind of nice sharp detail. I think a V-carve inlay produces the better results, as far as, because I can get more intricate and stuff. But the less work, as far as like quicker results and things, like a straight inlay all day long, because you got the female and a male, and the glue the together. There's no mirror this and put a border around it and carve it and all that stuff. None of those considerations to really worry about. But I love a V-carve inlay. My go-to is a V-carve inlay over a straight inlay any day. It just produces such good results.
Another issue with too much glue in your pocket is your piece, like you said, the vacuum, the piece doesn't fit all the way in like it's supposed to. Then when you go and mill off the surface and then sand it and everything, you could, if you got something that's real shallow in there, you could eliminate that piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that numerous times when I was first starting out, where my inlay, V-carve inlay, the part that's going to, some of the part of the design is already shallow as it is, right? There's not a whole lot going in there. And I was following the instructions. I was putting glue on this and glue on that, and, not enough glue pressure and not enough, squeeze out to get it in there. And when I would go to sand, I'm trying, my thing with sanding is I'm trying to get rid of the glue residue on the surface. But what I was end up doing is I would end up exposing my edges, because when the V-fit doesn't fit together, and you mill away and everything, that exposed edge, of the female pocket, because the male plug didn't get down far enough to get to the walls, right? If I move me down to the corner, hold on a second. I don't need to switch screens for this. Let me just get me down out of the way. If my male does not get all the way down into the female pocket, then this air gap right here, when I'm sanding and stuff, it's going to expose this, and I'm going to have these open gaps all around my inlay. And that's what John, I believe that's exactly what you were kind of referring to.
Right, John? And the piece is so shallow because it's a real tiny cut depth, for the piece. You could eliminate that piece when you're sanding it, finishing it.
Right. Yep. 100%. And then it's just like, oh man, all that work, and I just lost it all and everything. So, shout out to Stefan for utilizing some of his tutorial graphics. He's done a great job in his teachings. And again, everybody should go watch his videos. All right, so let's go back to Patrick here. What are the challenges when not using ingrain of the pocket piece? So let me Doug the Daw ask, what are the challenges with not using ingrain of pocket pieces? Hold on, I'm trying to figure out what he means by that.
Well, you're creating end grain every time you cut it, so technically you're not going to be able to not use end grain, because you're when you cut the wood, you're making end grain.
Right. Yeah. So Doug the Daw, when you're cutting your female pocket and when you're cutting your male, you're exposing end grain. Either one. So you're always using that. So I don't know that there's ever an instance where I don't, unless it's plastic, right, or something like that, where there is no end grain. You know what I mean? Or epoxy inlay or something where there's no end grain. But I don't foresee there's no challenges. I don't have any challenges that I could answer to that question as far as what are the challenges with that. And now an end grain cutting board. In the case of the end grain cutting board, you can do a straight grain male, flat grain male with an end grain cutting board and everything. I wouldn't recommend it. I would use end grain on end grain and all that stuff. But don't run it through a planer or anything like that. Let your CNC kind of mill it down, or use a handsaw and then an orbit sander. But either way, even on an end grain cutting board, you're still exposing end grain with your pockets, with your male and your female. So I'm blank on that one, Doug. There's no challenges. There's no challenges. So those are good questions. And I'm assuming, let's see here, Brooks Martin, I'm going to go back up in a few questions here. Brooks says, if the male plug is end grain, 0 gap. I want you, Brooks, to come back on that one and tell me what you mean by 0 gap. If the male plug is an end grain plug.
I think what he means is that he's using the straw effect of the end grain to soak up any glue that's in the bottom of the female.
Yes.
So that's
it's going to suck. Yeah, probably no glue gap. It probably minimize your glue gap as much as possible, because it's going to suck up that, glue, and that's regardless, because we're exposing end grain. As we just said, and it's going to soak up some glue, but that doesn't mean flood. You don't want a puddle of glue sitting in your female pockets, because you're going to get some glues out, but you're not going to get it all. I on intricate designs, I like glue. Taking my brush, I got a silicone tip brush. I like brushing the glue on the male part. If it's a pocket cut or something where it's kind of open, let's say I'm, in the case of like a straight inlay, I like, getting in the inside edges, inside corners and stuff on the female side of things, versus the male. So it just depends on the job, which one I do. But my worst, here's another bad inlay job. Now, this one was so bad I painted it. It's terrible. Okay, so on this was supposed to be a wavy flag with like a marine eagle on it, and inlaid into the top of this lid. And the finish, the carving came out so bad. The wavy flag came out so bad. I painted the whole thing silver. And also, you can see the inlay. Wait, let me see if I can find a bad gap. There, it's hard to see in the light. But anyway, there's bad gaps in everything. Well, when this was a test fit, I didn't glue this in. I saw that this was a bad carving, and I painted it. I just painted it just so it was something, so I could, because I had to take it to a show to show, just have something like show and tell. But I knew that this was going to end up getting replaced, this inlay, because I want, it's a decent box, just a bad top. So this part isn't glued in. One day it's going to get popped out, and I'm going to put a new inlay in there, and everything. I don't know what it's going to end up being, but Yeah, this was my first kind of go around. This was a straight inlay too. It wasn't even a V-carve inlay. Straight inlay and all, and it I did a batch. How can you screw up a straight inlay? But I can't. You can. Anybody can do anything. But that was kind of my very first. That was one of my very first inlays with the CNC. Grown from there. Let's see here. All right, Brooks Martin came back with an answer for Doug's question about challenges. Chip out. But again, I don't, Brooks, I mean, yeah, chip out is a very big concern with in-grain cutting boards and stuff, but I don't know if that's what he was referring to. Now, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, there, but if you ever do a cutting board, like an in-grain cutting board, one of your biggest concerns is if you're trying to run it through a planer is chunking and chipping out that in-grain, right? And everything. I am a big advocate of putting it on the CNC and surfacing it, flipping it over, surfacing the other side. I do not run an in-grain cutting board through the planer at all. Especially on the glue ups, when you glue up the in-grain chunks and everything, and now you have this funky board that needs to be flattened out before you can do anything, like the actual, like right after that initial glue up of the cutting board or the butcher block. I don't run it through a planer. Absolutely not. It goes on a CNC. And if you don't have a CNC, for everybody, hopefully everybody has a CNC that's watching, but you might not, a planer sled, right? A sled plane, a router sled is another good way. But if you're running through a planer, make sure you have a lead board and a tail board, meaning that a scrap piece of wood that goes in the planer first, immediately following by the end grain cutting board and ending with, so there's no blowout or chip out. And snipe, you'll get the snipe on the waste boards, the lead board and the tail board, and that's your project. All right. So there's not a whole lot to talk about much more than that when it comes to inlays. Just the two methods and everything. With the V-carve inlay, when it comes to different graphics, you have a lot more freedoms, with the vectors you choose or the designs you choose. You have a lot more freedoms with a V-carve inlay versus a straight inlay because, again, the loss of detail based on the router bit. 60 degree, this is my last thing I'll harp about that. 60 degree would be the largest size V-bit that I personally would, say to use, because if you're doing V-carve, that 90 degree giving you that shallow cut, it's kind of just your I think somebody might argue the point with me on that, but I think you're setting yourself up for the potential of something not going right. 22, Daryl, who was it that Roger? Hold on a second. Ron Bishop used a 22 and everything. 22 is great. The Whiteside SC50 is a great bit for V-carve inlays. Deep or shallow, it just gives you more depth and definition, more depth in your little pockets and stuff. So it's a good choice.
Well, you could just take
a 60 kind of guy.
Just
to start off with.
If you just want to see what your depths is with your V bits, for that, just take a piece of wood and put, say, like a T or a letter, the same letter, all the way, down it 4 or 5 times, and then run each bit, and it will show you how deep each bit is going to cut. And so then you'll have your idea, okay, well, this is why I don't use this, and this is why I do use that. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Because, when it comes to that, even in a regular V-carve, forget the inlay side of things, if you did a sample cut, the same letter, same word or whatever, with a, let's go 15, 22, 60, 90, and 120. It's a good range of V-bits. You would see, the 120, of course, is shallower. all the cuts, just so you know, when it's a regular V-carve, all the cuts will look exactly 100% the same, regardless of what V-bit you use. The only thing that varies and the only thing that's different is the depth of cut. So, you know, that 120 is going to be a very shallow cut. The 90 is going to be a little bit deeper, the 60 a little bit deeper, the 22 deeper, and then the, you know, the 15, you know, even deeper. And in some cases, depending on your design, you know, you could carve through your material, right? So you get the warning thrown up saying that, hey, it's going to carve through the material. So then you would use the wider V bit, right, to eliminate that. But one, you can see. Ooh, we had a little bit of a blackout there. One, you can see the. Stay there for a minute. But number one, you can see that, like John's saying, you can see if you do a sample, like a little sample board, you can see the depth of cut. That'll tell you not only for your V-carves, but also for your inlays, what you can kind of expect and things like that. And it's just not bad. Now, Brooks says, how about a 4.8 degree tapered ball nose for V-carve inlays? I would never recommend a tapered ball nose, period. I don't care if it's a 30-second or anything for an inlay. I just wouldn't. I honestly wouldn't. There's going to be parts of an inlay that are V'd based on the design, and then there's going to be parts that are flat based on your flat depth and everything. And that part that's a V, if I'm doing a V-carve inlay with a tapered ball nose, I'll have a radius there, but then when I'm using that same bit to cut the mel out, there could be a possibility. I don't know 100% if that's true or not that it would change, but that would just be too much of that would be too much of a risk for me. I want my point of my bit. And also, again, I'm coming into even though it's a tapered bit, I'm now handcuffed to the radius of the tip of the bit into how far I can get into the areas that I can get into. My V bit, it might be shallow, but I can get down to some fine points with a V bit. I would never, unfortunately, Brooks, I would never recommend a tapered ball nose for a V-carve inlay and all that. All right. Anything you guys want to add? I think I bored Ronnie. He rushed out. No, I'm just kidding. He probably had to go, but he's like, man, I can't handle this. He had to bug out. I didn't run him off or put him to sleep. He had a client come in. He is doing some cool stuff with those pistol grips. I got to work with him one-on-one the other night, and fun stuff. But anything that you guys want to add or share or anything like that before we say our goodbyes? There's really not much more. It's a simplistic topic. It's complicated in some ways, but it's rinse and repeat kind of thing. Once you know your numbers or you get the gist of it, it's the same steps for no matter what. The only thing that changes is the design. So there's not a whole lot to really reiterate. But do you have anything you want to add?
Cost me $400 to learn how to do that.
Really?
Yeah, between all the wingy and maple that I just destroyed because
right.
Said, I got chip out. I got uneven when I was putting the maple into the wingy. It was off centered. I'd go to it off. Ping! There goes a piece.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was
that stuff isn't cheap either. Not a bit. I know that zebra wood. That's expensive for where I am down here. I mean, I forget how much I paid for a board of that, but it wasn't cheap by any means. And when that inlay came out the way it did, I thought I was like I put the finish on. I was saying there was still a little bit of the walnut was still kind of like a tannish brown. It wasn't a dark brown yet, But when that finish hit it, it darkened up and it made it almost the same color as my zebra wood. And I was like, oh, that was stupid. That was just stupid. But, you know, it is what it is. And that the leg, that spindle, that was for me, it was a 6-hour carving. It wasn't too bad. But there was just a lot of time in that. And then it just came out the way it did. And it was like, well, that was supposed to be my showpiece. And the spindle's about the only thing showy on it. All right. Good night, Keith Kessler. Appreciate you staying and hanging out. But and we're going to say good night to everybody. I think we've kind of beat this topic to death on this one. But again, if you have questions, you can ask those questions if you're in the Spindle TV exclusive group. You can ask questions in the group. I'm happy to answer. You can also comment in the comment section of this video, and I'm happy to come back and go back and answer. I always check all that. But once again, I want to just thank everyone, all the members, for your support of Spindle TV. Everything you do is greatly appreciated. I need to update my little name board. We'll show it next time. But keep an eye out for the announcement. I'll announce it somewhere on YouTube and Facebook what class is going to get postponed from a Wednesday night to a Thursday, because I'll be attending Garrett's class. And I don't know if Garrett's live Wednesday night class that he does, his little live stream, I don't know if it's a private thing or if it's public. But if it's public,
No,
come on over and see.
it's public.
Okay. Well, yeah. So we're
Him and Katie usually do it every week, and Mark Lindsay's on there quite a bit.
yeah. So
Doing the hand carver for Disney again tonight.
Yes.
right.
So
That's hand carving.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
45 years of
That's-
the guy just doing, and it looks like he does all of Disney's stuff.
Right.
So like any sign that you see in the parks came out of this guy.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
Could you imagine apprenticing under someone like that, or, like, and know that there's going to come a day where this guy is, unfortunately, time is going to come to an end, or he's going to retire, or he's going to something. And then like, it's going to be on you. And you're like, man, I'm going to get a CNC. But, it kind of takes away the magic, I guess. But the skill level involved, I am not. Now, I'll admit it. I know my limitations. The carvings and the things that I do with my CNC, that make me as far as that decorative details and stuff, that makes me the woodworker that I am. If I had to rely on chip carving or chisel work or this or that, unfortunately, my woodworking would not be what it is, because I just can't do it. I don't have that skill set. So my hat's off to all skilled hand carvers and things like that. Please, I know CNC is kind of the devil's tool, but it's not. It's just another tool. Don't hate us, but we all respect what you do. We're not trying to take your job. All right. Well, listen, everybody, y'all have a wonderful evening. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys, on screen. Thanks for hanging out with me in the chats. And until next week, we'll see you soon. And I'll let you know when I'll be a guest on Garrett's show. Y'all have a great night.
have a good
You
one.
too.
All right. Stay safe. Bye now.
Bye.
Yep.